Drew from TC Energy. So Drew Willard is the manager of emissions reduction for the US Natural Gas Business Unit of TC Energy. Drew is responsible for operational and project-related opportunities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions across the US's natural gas pipeline footprint. Previously, he was a manager of measurement services for the TC, Columbia Gas, and Columbia Gulf systems. Drew is a seasoned leader who brings over 15 years of experience in the technology and operation of equipment for processing, storage, and transportation of natural gas. He has held various engineering and leadership positions in environmental gas measurement, reliability, pipeline integrity, and information technology. A strong believer in the important role natural gas plays in the energy mix that powers the world, Drew regularly undertakes process improvement projects to improve system reliability, efficiency, and carbon footprint reductions. When Drew isn't working, you can find him spending time with his wife and 4 kids. And with that, Drew, I will hand over to you.
Hey, Jasmine, thank you very much. I appreciate the intro. And also, thank you for going through that case study. That's actually a pretty good segue into what I wanted to talk about today. Next slide, please. So we'll talk a little bit about venting avoidance and vented emission sources, right? And so when you take a look at your program and you're looking at where all of your emissions are coming from, you have vented emissions and combustion emissions, and then you have leaks. And so when you look at the things that you can avoid, right, you're looking for your vented emission sources. And so what's on that list, right? You have things like ESD testing, for the midstreamers who have to blow down their stations on the regular to ensure that their emergency shutdown systems are working. Project blow down and purging, and so that was the case study, right? That is, project where you have to go and hydro a pipe and you have to take the gas out to make it safe for work, or you're putting in a new compressor and you have to go out and blow your station down to do that work. You have your compressor start up and blow down and purge systems. And so for some of the older compressors out there that are operating, consider that they don't have continuous hold. And so every time that those recips start up, they have to blow down the compressors to ensure that the starters can turn them over. You've got dehy systems, you have to regen your glycol. Launcher receiver tubes have to be blown down to pull the equipment out and put new equipment in. Meter tubes have to be blown down for inspections of the plates, inspections of ultrasonic transducers, turbine inspections, whatever it might be. And then filter separators on the regular, whether it's in some situations monthly, weekly, yearly, whatever it is, you have to blow them down to pull those elements out and put new elements in. And then, of course, just general compressor station maintenance, whether it's replacing valves or recips or doing visual inspections on centrifugals. You have to remove the gas from the system to make those safe for operation. Next, please. So this is a slide that sometimes I get a lot of flack for because it's not very pretty, right? It is a big, white, vast area. And I think that's the beauty of it. That's the reason I put it in here to have this conversation. So when you looked at all those different opportunities you had to reduce your emissions, right, to keep gas in your pipe or in your process, it's really a bit daunting because there are so many opportunities, and you can kind of get ahead of yourself going through and evaluating all of those different opportunities and their costs and what you can do and what you can't do. The reality of it is that for most mature operators, when you take a look at your venting events over a year, that's what we have an example of here. This is generic data, but this is kind of what most of you are going to see. When you take your distinct individual venting events and you rack and stack them by volume, you tend to have a lot of your volume under a small number of events. So what you're looking at here is 6,000 or so distinct individual venting events over a year. And as it turns out, about 150 of those events account for half of the volume vented throughout the year. And so it's not exactly as pretty as what you see, but when you start breaking down what those events are and where they're coming from, you're going to find that the vast majority of your large events are from projects, right, from midstreamers. And so we found that, and then we found that kind of the next block of venting events was really from the compressor operation. And then you had these enormous number of smaller volume venting events that were just maintenance operations, right? Think about blowing down 4-inch or 6-inch meter tubes for inspection. Think about launcher receivers, right, that you're blowing down to put pigs in for cleaning or for ILI or whatever it might be. And so the lesson here is the first thing you have to do to really figure out where you want to focus your dollars and your effort is to figure out where you can get the biggest bang for your buck, right? Which events are costing you the most in vented emissions? Next slide, please. So in line with the project venting, how can we deal with that? Well, the easiest thing to do or the most cost-effective thing to do is to bring in your mobile compression, right, for venting mitigation. And that was the case study that we just saw. And so a few considerations that I think a lot of folks may have not realized are there until they've really dug into this. And so you've got mobilization costs, right, as compared to the cost of actually operating the equipment. And so this is really a function of the volume that you have available to you to mitigate. So your mobilization costs can be, $200,000. And if you only have, say, a 4-inch pipe, that's a mile long that you're trying to blow down or trying to pump down before you blow down, you're not going to have a whole lot of value there in the gas, right, as compared to those mobilization costs as opposed to bigger projects. If you have 30 miles of 30-inch pipe and 1,000 pounds, you've got a lot of gas there to work with when you're trying to offset those mobilization costs with the value of that gas. You also have to consider the capital pipe work that you have to put in for the connections. And so, something to consider here is that not all of these systems, right, that we're operating that have been built since the early 1900s until now really were set up for this, right? So you have to have, the ability on both sides of your isolation valve to have a connection, a physical connection to attach your suction of your mobile compressor and the discharge on the other side of that isolation valve. And so sometimes that has to be done prior to you bringing in your portable compression. And again, that can add hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to your project that you're then trying to offset with the value of that gas. You also have to consider demand credits. So these portable compressors, they do not instantaneously remove the gas from the isolated segment, put it into the flowing segment, right? Those compressors can take, depending on how they're sized, 3, 4, 5 days, right? Depending on, again, how much gas you want to move. So you have to consider that if you're taking your pipe out of service for an additional 3 or 4 days, you have demand credits and lost revenue that you'd have to account for, that you may have to pay back to your shippers, or in the case of like a producer, right, that's lost days of production. You also have to consider the equipment purchase versus service model. There's the idea that if you're doing this stuff on the regular, that you should be able to go out and purchase these mobile and portable compressors. There's also the opportunity and the consideration that there are contractors gearing up now as we speak, really to occupy this service sector. And so you just have to evaluate those opportunities that you have every year with how often you'll be doing it for yourself or bringing someone in. And then you also have to assess your ability to kind of slowly pull these things down. When you're doing an integrity dig, for instance, where you're uncovering an anomaly detected by an inline inspection, when you get down there and you inspect it, it could be a situation where you're going to have to blow that down very quickly due to the severity of the anomaly, or potentially have the opportunity over 2 or 3 days to pull that down a little more slowly with the pumps. You have to also consider your schedule, right, and how this fits in with your ability to bring contractors in and out, and how long you have on site. Consider the value of the gas in what's offsetting the cost of the operation. And then other further incentives like carbon taxes that can help bolster your business case. And then, of course, regulations, right? There are some situations where the regulations, whether they're federal, state, or provincial, or whatever they are such that you have to do it, you have to blow it down. And so the cost considerations are probably not as important. And so the end result of all these considerations is really what you see on the right. It's, at the end of the year, you can take a look at all of your projects, and again, generic data here, but you look at how much volume was mitigated, how much CO2 you saved, the capital costs for mitigation, demand credit costs, and then the value of the gas recovered. And so, you find that on your larger volume projects, frankly, the value of that gas offsets all of the other costs that you had to incur to do that work. And then as you get down into the smaller and smaller volumes, again, think about an 877, thousand cubic foot smaller, again, 4-inch pipe, and you didn't recover any money, right? Because the gas wasn't worth that much. Next slide, please. So the other piece, when looking back at your at your rack and stack of your event, is the compressor blowdowns and purges. And so really it's the same idea, same technology, right? You're just looking at in place compression, right? That sits in your compressor station and recovers that gas loss during unit or equipment blowdown or dry seals or whatever kind of maintenance. So consider here just the capital upfront costs, right? This is important to note in that you can do this with new construction, you can do this with a brownfield project, but it's going to vary. It's going to change what your cost is to install the equipment. And so when you break it down into how much you're going to save every year, it's pretty straightforward because you have historicals from your stations and you know what they're emitting. And so this equipment can be quite cost effective when you look at it on a dollar per ton recovery basis. And so again, just need to consider, in what type of project you're doing this work. So next slide, please, and we'll have a few final thoughts here. So, venting mitigation, at least in the U.S., I understand that we have a multinational audience here today, but in the U.S., there's no regulatory driver, right, for venting mitigation, and so it kind of all comes down to what kind of costs you can incur and still get recovery of those costs. And so when you build out your marginal abatement cost curve, again, it's just a rack and stack, right? So you're stacking this up against opportunities to reduce your leaks, right? To go out and repair valve stems and compressor seals, and you're comparing against opportunities to go out and replace pipe. You may have pipe in the ground that's coupled and threaded, and so you want to replace and reduce those leaks. You're also comparing against opportunities to reduce your combustion emissions, and so newer, more modern gas turbines that are 3, 4, 8, 10% more efficient. And so you really have to build out the back curve and understand the cost of the opportunity. And then again, the return mechanisms, the recovery mechanisms. Are you a regulated pipe, or are you a producer who's selling gas potentially into markets where you can get higher value for your gas if it's produced in a more environmentally sound technique, right? So you have to be able to quantify and understand what those values are. And then also, for your big opportunities with like your pipeline, frankly, your pipeline, your station construction work, where you have the big opportunities with the big volumes, there are other techniques. It's not just portable compression. You have to consider that you can use newer technology like robotic inspections for your pipe rather than blowing down and doing the manual inspections. Consider flaring opportunities. We know that there's a 25x multiplier on flared gas as compared to, venting methane directly into the atmosphere. And so, though you don't get the recovery on the dollars of the gas, right, because the gas still leaves, there is oftentimes an opportunity to reduce your GHGs overall by flaring that gas. You can also kind of use your existing demand and existing compression. And I think most people are probably already doing this, right? When you do a project, you use your compressors to pull that down really as much as you can prior to blowing the atmosphere, or to even using your portable compression. But you can also be a little more creative and use other opportunities like isolating the segment and using delivery meters and things like that to pull down a little more. Hot tap and line stop's always there and always available. When you're doing a size on size on a pipeline, it tends to make a lot of sense, to come in and do that hot tap rather than to blow down and cut out and put in a T. And then get creative, right? I've found that when you push this down to the technicians in the field, oftentimes they have new and interesting ideas, right? They can go out and do things that you're not necessarily aware that are out there, and options that make sense. They have ways to manipulate the system and to look at things that you just don't have visibility from a management or a leadership perspective.